What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. This is Leo's Nerd Talk, and today we're going to be talking about Martin Scorsese's newest film, Killers of the Flower Moon. So let's talk about it. Killers of the Flower Moon was my most anticipated movie coming into the fall, and gladly it doesn't disappoint, but it's also not exactly what I expected. Now, starting off with the positives for me, I think acting across the board was definitely amazing. Of course, you can't really go wrong with a cast like Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, and then even with Lily Gladstone, which plays Leonardo DiCaprio's wife in the movie. I thought she was probably the limelight on a lot of the acting. She did an amazing job for me across the board, and I really enjoyed her performance in the movie throughout the entire runtime. And speaking of runtime, this is a 3.5 hour long movie. So it's definitely not for the faint of heart, right? You're going in here to see Martin Scorsese movie. You know it's going to be shot beautifully. You know it's going to have great visuals, great acting. Martin Scorsese, when he's on top of his game, he is on top of his game, right? He gives us stuff like The Goodfellas, The Departed, even stuff like The Wolf of Wall Street, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And this definitely gives me a lot of Wolf of Wall Street vibes. Not just because Leonardo DiCaprio is the main actor, but just because his acting and his performance in this movie gives me a lot of kind of similarities to his performance in The Wolf of Wall Street, and it's also kind of the main synopsis and plot of this film, where you have Robert De Niro, who is trying to get the money from all these kind of oil that the Indian people have claim to. You know, this is on their land. Oil is on the Indians' land, and he's trying to take that away from them by basically murdering a bunch of people. And when you have that kind of money scheme, because it's basically like an life insurance type of money scheme that they're trying to go through, it kind of reminds me a lot of Wolf of Wall Street with the whole stock scheme, where they're trying to kind of get money through their own stocks and buying their own stocks and stuff like that. And even when they start getting cracked down, and you know, the FBI is coming down to investigate, the way Leonardo DiCaprio's performance is, where he starts panicking and overthinking scenarios, is very reminiscent again of Wolf of Wall Street, when they start cracking down on him and he starts to overthink stuff, and he gives himself away very easily because of the way he reacts. And that's not a knock on the movie, because that definitely fits within what they're trying to do in the movie, and it definitely brings up the intensity of the plot. And this movie is extremely intense, not because there's a lot of action or fight sequences or anything like that. It's just the dialogue itself. The performance, the dialogue, the back and forth, the split that Leonardo DiCaprio, or Ernest as his name in the movie, has to decide whether he wants to help his uncle or help his wife that he says he truly loves. And he has that conflicting kind of mindset throughout the entire runtime of the movie. And it's interesting to see him kind of going back and forth, and I really enjoyed that. And then again, like I said, with Lily Gladstone, her side of it, where her family is, and even just her tribe in general, because she's part of this big tribe that owns this land, and seeing the murders happen and her getting more and more devastated, and she's going through fighting with diabetes, and at the time medicine is not as prominent, so it's a lot more difficult for her to kind of overcome that sickness, right? So seeing her kind of life get depleted away from her, as well as trying to stay positive with her husband, thinking that her husband has nothing to do with anything, it's a very interesting scenario, a very interesting movie, and I really enjoyed it throughout the entire time. It's definitely a movie that I wouldn't recommend to a lot of people, especially because with long run times like this, and when there's not too much going on, it's mainly dialogue. I can understand that not a lot of people can sit through a 3.5 hour runtime movie like that and enjoy it throughout the whole time. It did feel slow at times, but it was interesting enough to keep me invested, and I didn't really die off too much at all. And then I also really enjoyed the score. You know, the score was really nice. It was really interesting. It definitely kept the intensity up with the score. That was another positive for me as well. And then I also really enjoyed the performance of kind of the main investigator from the FBI, played by Jesse. I can't think of his last name off the top of my head, but he was also in Breaking Bad. I really enjoyed his performance as kind of the lead investigator, and the way they kind of snap things together and kind of lay it all out there. And I thought that was pretty good, because the movie throughout the entire time, it shows you what's going on. It's not like it's not too much of a big mystery throughout the entire time, because you know exactly what's going on. From the beginning, it lets you know that Robert De Niro's character is trying to get the money from the Indians. Leonardo DiCaprio is in between both sides, and all these different murders are happening. So that's not really a surprise. You can even gather that from the trailer itself. So that's not really necessarily a spoiler by any means. But I definitely really enjoyed the movie. I thought the story was, like I said, pretty intense throughout the entire time. It did have a little bit of a slow start, but it just got more and more interesting as it goes along. And it kind of has this even kind of court style movie towards the end of it, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then it kind of ends off on a very strange note. I don't want to say strange, but it's not what I expected it to end on. It was pretty interesting. I definitely recommend seeing the movie. Like I said, a 3.5 hour long movie. I understand not everybody can kind of run through that, but if you do have the chance, I definitely recommend it. Martin Scorsese, the visuals, the camera work, his directing is amazing. He's obviously one of the top directors of all time. He's one of the elites that are up there. So if you are definitely a big film fanatic and a person that loves certain directors and loves Martin Scorsese, this is definitely one I recommend checking out. But what are the negatives for me, or the cons? With a 3.5 hour runtime and a predominantly dialogue heavy movie, it's not a movie that I can definitely watch multiple times. Versus something like Oppenheimer, for instance, which is also a very heavily predominantly dialogue type of movie. That movie, for some reason, captures me a lot more, and I can watch that over and over again if I really need to. This movie was definitely, like I said, beautifully shot, beautifully directed. Performances were through the roof. However, it is a hard movie to get through. It's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of things going up and down, different scenarios that are kind of really elongated when it comes to the scene. There's a lot of silences between characters where a character says something and they're just looking at each other, and that obviously extends the runtime. And it's definitely not a movie that I think I could watch again. Maybe once in a few years from now, or even 10 years from now, I can watch it again. But it's definitely not a movie that I'm gonna be running to pop into the DVD player or stream it online to see it again. It is a wonderful movie. I definitely recommend people taking a look at it. But that's kind of one of my drawbacks for it, is that the rewatchability of the movie is really not there. Another con for me is, I think the time frame of the actual movie can get a little hard to follow, because it seems like these events are happening really fast, and then eventually you kind of gather that this happens over a couple of years. Really, there's a part where a character, they announce they get pregnant midway through the movie, and 2-3 scenes later they have the baby in their hands. So it skips 8-9 months, maybe even 10 months, right? Because the baby looks a little older, but it just skips months in between, and it doesn't really tell you that. It just goes from one shot to the other. If it wasn't for that baby, showing that character pregnant and then the baby being born, you really couldn't tell that it had that time jump. So for someone that's just casually watching and not looking out for things like that, it might get confusing trying to follow with the timeline and how long these events are happening in between each other, because it is a pretty decent amount of time. But the way the film is shot, it makes it seem like these sequences are happening, one day after another, 1 week after another, in a short amount of time, but it's happening throughout a pretty long distance, which it's kind of a nitpick con there as well. But for like I said, the average watcher, especially watching a 3.5 hour long movie, you can get the fatigue of watching a movie like this that's very dialogue heavy, and you have to pay attention to what's going on. Sometimes you may miss those kind of time jumps, and some people might not like that. Me, I was able to catch it eventually, but there was times where I was like, this just happened one day after the other, and these are big events happening one day after the other. So that's just a small little con here for me. But overall, let me know what you guys thought about Killers of the Flower Moon. I really enjoyed it. I definitely recommend you guys watching it in theaters. support Martin Scorsese. He makes great films. Let me know what you guys thought about the movie. Not too many cons here for me. There's just certain little nitpicks thing here. I overall enjoyed the film. I thought it was beautifully shot, beautifully directed, beautiful performances, very high emotions, very intense. So go ahead and let me know what you guys thought about the comments down below. My thoughts are not always right. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts and see what you guys think about these types of movies. And again, if you guys like talking about anything movies, TV shows, or video games related, consider subscribing down below. I love making these videos here for you guys. And again, this is Leo's Nerd Talk, and I'll see you on the next review. Thank you.